and open our books to page 175. Page 175. Explaining abuse and addiction. Why do so many people abuse drugs, and why are people addicted to it? Well, it says here on page 175, the causes of substance abuse and addiction or dependence are complex. It seems to be the result of a combination of biological, psychological, social, and cultural factors that vary from person to person, as well as what psychoactive drug or drugs they use. So, are you addicted to anything? I don't mean one of these drugs. I'm not asking that. Are you addicted to anything?
Sugar, I think.
Sugar? So what do you drink with sugar in it?
I more eat things with sugar than drink things with sugar.
You put sugar on cereal?
No, I eat a lot of candy with sugar in it. Or
Wow.
artificial sweeteners.
Artificial sweeteners?
Yeah.
And if you don't get your artificial sweetener, do you get a headache?
Not exactly. I just want it on my taste buds.
You just go, I need some of that. I need some of that. Anybody else have a little bit of addictions?
Phone.
What?
My phone.
You're addicted to your phone?
Probably.
Yeah, that's relatable.
I think I might have an addiction to Welch's fruit snacks.
Anybody else? What is that? Coffee?
It's coffee.
Coffee? And if you don't drink your coffee, you get a headache?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And I just read recently drinking coffee is good for the heart. So old people who have heart problems ought to be drinking a little more coffee. My heart doctor didn't necessarily think that was a good idea, but I said, hey, I read it in the AARP magazine. Doesn't that mean anything? He said, no. When I was a young married man, I came home from work one day, and Sedan, right? And I said to my wife, she fed me some supper, and I went to the freezer to get a bowl of ice cream. And I said, where's the ice cream? She said, oh, she said, I ate it all up. I'm going, well, that's a fine how do you do. I don't know what that means. I just grew up with it. So can you believe this? I got in my car, went to the store, bought some ice cream so I could have my bowl of ice cream before I went to bed. Now, that man has a problem, right? Come on. And ice cream isn't necessarily bad for me. It's just that it just shows I kind of have an addictive personality. When I got busy in life and didn't get enough sleep and wanted to stay awake, I discovered Mountain Dew. And that's really not good for you. But I drank so much of it, I got to where if I didn't have a shot of Mountain Dew, I got a real bad headache. And then the doctor says, that's not so good for you, so you probably better do something about it. So I started drinking tea. First, I'm drinking tea with sugar. And then they say the best thing to do when you get older is just to cut the sugar out of your life. So I'm just telling you, if you live long enough to get old, they're going to tell you to give up all that sugar stuff and just start living without it. And it can be because I used to pour sugar on Cheerios, and my grandfather taught me how to put sugar on grapefruit to make it taste better. I put sugar on everything. And it's just like the longer you live, the more your body can't handle all of that. You have to make some adjustments. So all of us probably have a certain amount of susceptibility to some kind of addiction. I'm not sure being addicted to a telephone can hurt you, unless you're so addicted that if it rings when you're driving a car and you feel compelled to answer it and you can't find it, and so you start fishing through your purse to get it, and bang, you run into somebody or run off the road. That could be pretty dangerous. So it's just like, it's kind of like become aware of what your addictions are. I'll share another one with you. It probably means I have an addictive personality, is what the psychologists would say. As I share all these stories, they'd say, that man has an addictive personality, which means I'm just susceptible to becoming addicted to stuff. When our daughters were little, I came home from work one day, and I sat down, and she wanted to tell me something that happened at school, but I wanted to read the newspaper to find out what went on in the world that day. And I said, after I finish this paper, you can tell me about it. And after I finished reading the paper, I said, so tell me about school. And she said, oh, it wasn't that important. It was like she hit me in the chest with a baseball bat. I had just made reading a newspaper to find out what goes on in the world more important than my daughter. Was that wrong? Was that wrong? Yes, it was wrong. So, what do? I said, you know what? I'm becoming addicted to reading this newspaper. So, I'm a pretty radical person. So, I just called the newspaper and canceled my subscription. When the doctor says Mountain Dew's bad for you, I just quit drinking it. I quit eating ice cream. It's like, all that stuff I'm addicted to, I'll just give it up to show that I have some self-discipline. And there's no question that it was hard to do it, but it's just like, I am not going to let this temple of the Holy Spirit be controlled by anything other than God Himself. And that means I would ask God for help in terms of handling these things, just because it's like, I want to take care of the body that God has given me. And of course, now we go from there, what you would call maybe less harmful kinds of addiction, to the ones that are creating a serious problem in our society. I just saw something recently in my internet research that I was doing, where this lady was talking about how much it's costing us as a society to take care of all of the problems created by drug abuse and drug addiction. And the focal point of the article was, here was a little baby who was born to a mother who couldn't stop taking drugs while she was pregnant. So does anyone know what happens when that little baby's born? The baby's born, the blood goes through the placenta and takes the drugs with it. This little baby is getting an overload of drugs while it's so small. When it's born, it's a drug addict, and the little newborn has to go through withdrawal. And for some newborns, the drug addiction is so intense and it's so dramatic that it actually kills the little baby. I mean, it's a serious thing. But this person who was given this article was talking about it and said, and finally, the woman who had the baby was loving on the baby, and she was crying when she told about how her addiction affected her baby. And as a result of having this addicted baby and doing that, she said, I just can't believe I did that to my child. I feel so terrible about it. And she had gone into rehab and had been off drugs for quite some time. So he was telling, she was a success story, but then he went on to tell about, there's a lady, she went on to tell about the total cost of taking care of the preemie that was drug addicted, of all the total cost of it in our culture and our society, for what drugs is costing us as a society to take care of it, and that we need to do something about it. And probably the best thing to do is to say, okay, first, when it talks about biological factors, over here on page 176, there is evidence of a genetic basis for alcohol abuse. And in other words, do some people just have a genetic predisposition to be addicted to alcohol and drugs and tobacco and coffee or tea or ice cream or Mountain Dew. It's like, well, based on my track record, I probably do have an addictive personality or an addictive gene that says, if you're not careful, Tom, about what goes into your body, you can become addicted to it. Now, that being said, and if it is genetic, if there's any truth to this genetic stuff, then I probably inherited those genes from some ancestors. Now, guess what? I come from a family who are adamant about not drinking. And when they talk about why they feel that way, they point back to some ancestor who was an embarrassment to the family name because of his alcoholism. Isn't that interesting? So here could be a group of people who have a genetic weakness and have simply said, we just don't drink. I mean, if you have a genetic tendency to become addicted to alcohol, and if you don't drink it, then you'll never become addicted to it. You follow the rationale? So, to me, if there is a genetic connection, then just simply say, then be careful about what you do and don't do those kinds of things. And one of my friends who runs a mission in Peoria, Illinois, to help drug addicts, alcoholics especially, get their lives straightened out again, he says he's found a biblical basis for not drinking. That who in Israel society, in their structure, what group of people were told not to drink? The priests and the Levites. And listen to what he says. He says, and we are a priest. We are a priestly people. And he said, therefore, that's enough of a biblical basis for me to say to my family and my grandchildren, don't touch it. Stay away from it. And if you're in a culture where, because this textbook talks about on page 177, the cultural effects that are going on, and I suppose it'd be okay to talk about that. Some of the cultural effects that are going on, it talks about Muslims and Mormons. And by the way, when it said Mormon communities don't drink, it's strictly forbidden. So I went to the internet to say, do Mormons drink? And I found an interesting thing on here. I won't take time to look it up right now because I want to keep talking about this. But if you go to the internet and Google it as one of your research areas, actually Utah does not have the lowest percentage of people drinking. The two lowest states were West Virginia and Kentucky. I think that's what it said. Maybe I better click it up here and look at it.
What were the highest?
Let's scroll down here. Oh, I have to turn it on, don't I? Yeah, pardon me. There you go. Ooh, look at that stuff. Now see, okay, that picture, I have to confess, that picture looks appealing, right? But when you smell it, does it smell like something you would want to drink? If it smells bad, why drink it? And one time I was meeting with a guy in a business meeting, and he ordered a cocktail, and he said, do you want one? And I said, no thank you. He said, why? Don't you drink? And I said, no. The reason I said no thank you to this cocktail is it smells bad, and I'm looking at the look on your face when you drink it, and both of them tell me it's not worth spending the money to consume it. He goes, well, it's an acquired taste. I said, well, if I have to work at acquiring a taste for it, and it costs that much, I'll just ask the waitress to bring me a glass of water. So I didn't moralize with him. I just gave him some stuff here. Let's see. Utah is the third lowest level of excessive drinking in America, with only 12% of the adults. But now watch this. I mean, I thought this was interesting, but only 12% of adults say they binge drink or consume alcohol excessively. If you did a survey of people in Raymore or Belton or Grandview or Kansas City and said, or Peculiar or Pleasant Hill, and you said, do you binge drink or consume alcohol excessively? What would some excessive drinkers say? No. You understand they wouldn't want to admit to that? So if this was a survey, then it might not be good information. But let's look down here anyway. North Dakota is, that's where you went back this summer?
South Dakota.
South Dakota? Okay, if you go to North Dakota, watch out for the drunkards, because it says it's the drunkest state in the nation. But with 25% of adults reporting that they drink heavily. It was followed by Wisconsin, 24, and Alaska, 22. States with lower alcohol. Okay, now see, this verifies that survey. Only 19% of driving deaths, wait a minute, in North Dakota, the highest rate of alcohol-related driving deaths was 46%. So do you see, that additional information kind of validates that state has the highest drinking rate, because you don't do a survey to find out who was in an accident from drinking. That's in the police report. So apparently they've got some pretty good information here. When I read that, I said, wow, this could be useful information. And where is it? Well, where did it go? Did anyone see the other two states in there? Well, there it is. Tennessee is the most sober state with 11%, and West Virginia, not Kentucky, West Virginia is the second with 11.4%. So two states that have a lower rate of drinking than Utah would be Tennessee and West Virginia, not Kentucky. See, I guess the reason I thought it might have been Kentucky is because that's where they make all this stuff. Does this surprise you? Sometimes the people who make stuff and sell stuff that makes people drunk see the effect of it and don't drink it themselves. This was a real shock to me when I was doing some research on drugs and drug dealers. A lot of drug dealers don't do drugs. They start out by giving away to teens and preteens for free. And how long do they give them to them? Till they're addicted, and then they make them start to pay. And if they don't have any money, they tell them to go steal stuff. And guess what else they tell them? It's pretty sad. They say, look, at your age, your police record will be expunged when you're 18, so it doesn't matter. Just go ahead and steal stuff to support your habit, and then give it to me, and I'll sell it and make some money with it. You know, there's a Bible verse for people like that. Better that a millstone were hung about your neck and you were cast into the sea than to lead a little one astray. Okay, and then on page 177, at the top of the page, it talks about psychological and some psychological kinds of things. What's it say? A person who drinks or smokes marijuana, this is right in the middle of the page, because he thinks he needs a drug to overcome social inhibitions and be accepted, is more likely to slip into abuse than someone who uses the same substance in the same amounts because he wants to have more fun. So what? One person drinks because they say it will loosen up my inhibitions and I'll be more sociable. And another one drinks because he wants to have more fun. And my observation of people who drink is they're not having more fun. They're just being stupid, doing stupid stuff, and making other people laugh so they think they're entertaining them. And the ones who drink it to overcome their shyness, they not only overcome their shyness, there's apparently something in the alcohol that kind of restricts your inhibitions, so they start saying things and doing things that the next day they're totally embarrassed about. One time my wife and I moved into a neighborhood of new homes, and I felt compelled to reach out to these families to try to introduce them to Christ, and so we put up a volleyball net in our backyard and had invited them to come and play volleyball and have refreshments and stuff and get to know them. And some of these guys, well, where's the beer? I said, well, I didn't bring any, I didn't buy any. And so they said, we need to have a block party. And so they'd have a block party and bring a lot of booze. And my wife would say, are we going? And I said, well, we're going for a while, but we're not going to stay long, because once everybody starts getting tanked up. Have any of you lived in a neighborhood where they have block parties where a whole bunch of people get drunk, and for the next 3 months everybody's mad at everybody else for some guy making a pass at someone's wife, or somebody said something that was inappropriate and everybody got offended? Well, we always left before that started. So eventually the families who didn't want to get caught up in all of the after effects of people becoming uninhibited by drinking, they would come to our house and hang out with us and play games. Yahtzee. I forget what all kinds of games. My wife had a bunch of them we played. We would just play these table games. And the next day, when everybody's mad at each other, the neighbors and us were the only ones that people weren't mad at. They said, at least there's some nice people in our neighborhood. Well, it's because we stayed away from that kind of stuff. Okay, page 178 talks about meditation and hypnosis. Anyone here ever been hypnotized? Have you ever been in a place where some hypnotist asked someone to volunteer? Did you think about volunteering? Not me, I didn't either. And guess what? That's why he wants volunteers. If he would have picked those of us who don't want to be hypnotized, he would have trouble hypnotizing us. He needs somebody who says, yeah, I want you to do whatever you're going to do to me. And I'm thinking, not me, not me. I don't want you messing with me. Don't turn me into a board that somebody can stand on. Maybe it works for that day, but I'll probably have a sore back the next day. So I just never volunteered for anything like that. But what about meditation? Well, the other day, I was at the doctor, and she took my blood pressure, and she goes, whoa, do you always have high blood pressure? And I said, no, normally my blood pressure is normal. Usually they tell me I'm in good shape. She said, well, it's really high now. And I said, well, it could be that I just came from the dentist, and that might have shot it up a little bit. She goes, yeah, that would do it. And she said, and we've been visiting while I've been taking it. Let's take it again and have you not talk to me. And so I just thought, based on what I read in these psychology books, I thought, take a deep breath, inhale, exhale, relax a little bit, and see if it can bring your blood pressure down. Now, I wasn't saying it out loud. I was just talking to myself, doing a little calm yourself down. Anyone ever do that? Just talk to yourself about calm down a little bit. She took the reading again. She said, there, that's better. Yeah, she said, that looks good. Whoa, just by talking to myself a little bit, I could bring my blood pressure reading down? Yes. So here's where you can use some of the stuff from this book in your life. You say, if I'm in a tense situation, if I'm in some place, I can do some things to calm myself back. And wouldn't you know, when they call it biofeedback, it's like I'm talking to myself about calming my body down, and it seems to have a calming effect on the body. But when I looked at all this stuff that they mention on page 178, the bottom of the page, about meditation, Zen meditation, Sufism, transcendental meditation, mantras, I wrote a question at the bottom of the page. Why didn't they mention CMOS, since they all have letters with them? Anyone know what CMOS stands for? You want to guess? Okay, just go MOS. What do you think MOS stands for? Meditating on Scripture. You've heard people talk about if you can't go to sleep at night, count your sheep. You say, what if I don't have any sheep? What were you told to do? Recite Bible verses, and it'll help you fall asleep. Why didn't they mention in all this list of people doing meditation, why didn't they mention Christians meditating on Scripture? Isn't that a form of meditation that's helpful? To take a Bible verse that you read in the morning, carry it with you all day long and just stop and meditate on it? Or as one preacher said one time in a message, I'll never forget it, it just grossed a bunch of people out, but he said, you know what meditation is? It's like a cow chewing a cud. Any of you raise cattle? Any of you ever see a cow standing out in the pasture moving their mouth, but they're not reaching down and getting more grass? Does anyone know what's going on biologically? My wife says, Tom, why do you gross people out with that stuff? Well, a cow has more than one stomach because it's hard to digest grass. So after they eat the grass, it goes in their first stomach. Then they kind of belch it up and just sit there and chew on it. That's gross, I know. But I just thought it was cool to share that. And this preacher said that's kind of what's going on when you're chewing on Scripture throughout the day. And I think, no, let's stick to meditation. That's a much better description of what's happening. And I wish they would mention that in here, but since they don't, I'll just add it to my list. And that would be Christians meditating on Scripture. And the fact that, have you ever been in a kind of a traumatizing situation where you actually, I guess I can turn that off again, where a Bible verse came to mind and you start saying the Bible verse over and over and over again, and it gave you a sense of peace and tranquility in a tough situation? Well, there you go. Just, what is that? Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on thee. Just make sure that. And so I guess what I'm saying is these other forms of meditation probably are helpful, but not near as helpful as hiding God's Word in our heart and meditating on it and meditating on our relationship with God when things are getting tough or our bodies going bizarre on us and we're wondering what to do next. Okay. Looks like we're ready for chapter 5, learning. So are you learning anything that's useful in this class as we stand here and talk about it? Now, I know I've given you a lot of ways to use psychology in your life. Or have I done that? That's what I've been trying to do. Have I been mentioning ways that you can use psychology in your life? No, that's not what I want to do. Maybe it is. Yeah. Well, have you learned it? They say, well, I remember you said something about using psychology to do something, but I think I forgot it. Well, then you haven't learned it. You heard me talk about it, but you haven't learned it. When will have any of you come across something in the book and you're reading, or something I've said in class, that you've actually said, I'm going to try that and see if it works? Oh, wait a minute. Didn't we do something with Philippians 4, 6, and 7? So what did you learn about reciting Philippians 4, 6, and 7 every day and talking to God about something that was stressing you out? Did you learn that it can take the stress away so quickly you forget to pray about it the next day because you're not stressed anymore? So now you've learned it. So learning basically is the acquisition. Well, what does it say here? On page 185. Learning is the process by which experience or practice results in a relatively permanent change in behavior or potential behavior. So what is learning? Learning is when, not when I've heard it, not when I've memorized it and can put it on a piece of paper as a correct answer for a test. Learning is when we experience something or practice something in a way that changes our lives. So ask yourself, have I learned anything from my parents? What are some things you learned from your parents? What are some things that you practice in your life that your parents told you how to do or showed you how to do it and you started doing it and now you do it on your own? When my wife, before she was my wife, as a college student, went to Oklahoma to visit my family, she was speechless when we sat down at the table to eat a meal. She looked around and everybody was talking 90 miles an hour, arguing with each other about anything. I mean, it's just like one of my brothers or sisters would say, Mom, these are the best potatoes you've ever made. And that's all we'd have to say. And boom, so I say, no, these are not the best potatoes. The best potatoes were back when. It's like, no, these are just as good as those. Okay, just as good, but not better than. So, in other words, it didn't matter what somebody said. Somebody at the table wanted to argue with them. Did anyone grow up in a house like that? Yeah, it's like that's just what we do. And Nina was just speechless watching this go on. And here we're consuming food, but consuming food is not the primary activity. Consuming food around this table just happened to be a byproduct of having an argument and disagreeing with each other and discussing things. Well, if you're having a conversation while you're consuming food, do you talk with food in your mouth? And she says, no. You wait till the food is all gone, or you hold your hand up like that? See, I'm laughing because I was never taught that when I grew up at home. I go to my wife's home for dinner. Before she was my wife, we sit down to eat, and I say, Mom, this is, or I said, Mrs. Manning, this is delicious. And people look at me like, we don't talk at the table. We sit at the table and eat our food. Then when the food's finished, then we talk. And I was introduced to this notion that you don't talk while you're eating. And then I'm in the cafeteria eating with some friends of mine, and once a week there was some lady that came to school to supervise the cafeteria and teach us proper eating habits. They would set the table in a special way, and we had to use the forks and spoons in the right order. And she would say, and some of you boys need to quit talking with food in your mouth. That's gross. That's rude. See, I wasn't taught that. You learned that, didn't you? That you don't talk with food in your mouth. So that means while you're eating, you're not talking. Or if you are, you're holding your hand up there so people can't see you talking. They can hear you. And I still smile about that because I think, what's the big deal? Then I see somebody talking with food in their mouth, and I'm going, gross. But see, I didn't see it. So then I see it, I think, oh, that is kind of gross. I'm going to have to try to work at learning not to talk with food in my mouth. And I'm about halfway successful with it. So can you think of something you've learned? Did anyone's parents teach you how to tie your shoes? Did all of your parents teach you how to tie your shoes? No. Okay, there's two of us. My mom didn't teach me how to tie my shoes either. So what do? How do you tie your shoe? If she didn't teach you, how'd you learn to do it?
I had to figure it out myself.
What?
I had to figure it out myself.
You figured it out yourself? Okay, do you tie your shoestrings backwards? Have you ever had anybody watch you tie your shoe? Did they say anything funny about the way you tie it? Yeah, you know why? Because you know what we do? We watch people tie a shoe, so when we tie our shoe, we tie it backwards. Because it's a mirror reflection of what we saw, but it works for us. But when someone sees us doing it, they go, what did you just do? I said, I just tied my shoe. And they go, that's not the way you tie your shoe. And they tie it the other direction. For us, they're doing it backwards. And that's why we do it backwards, because we've both learned. You learned how to do it by having someone show you how to do it. We learned how to do it by just watching others and doing it on our own. And then we find out later in life we tie our shoe backwards. We can't quit, can we? I tried to do it the other way, doesn't work. So I'm thinking, hey, if tying it backwards works, then I'll just keep tying it backwards. So what else have you learned? Yes?
I mean, I was homeschooled, so pretty much everything.
So now, okay, you were homeschooled, so your parents taught you how to read, and you've learned how to read. They taught you how to do math.
They tried.
See, now that's what I say. Well, they tried to teach me how to do math. Are your parents pretty good at math?
My dad is. My mom's not. My dad's not very good at teaching it. He understands it very easy, and he's like, you do this and this and this and this. There, it's easy. Okay, can you see why I went to school and got a degree in psychology as a math teacher? I know how to, math is just natural for me, but I find I live in a world of people where it's not natural to them, and I had to figure out how to get inside their heads and help them connect and make sense out of math. So that's why I started taking psychology courses, so I could, and then end up with a major in psychology, simply because I wanted to become a better math teacher. Because I understood math, just to explain it to others was kind of tough for me to do that. And as a teacher, I need to figure that one out. Yeah, and when I took your math class, I understood it a lot better.
Because I had taken these courses in how to help to understand how different people think and how to help get inside your head and turn that around. So it could be that, and see, this is why this word learning ought to be put in quotation marks. It's like, okay, you learned how to read at home. When it came to math, not so good, because the person in my house who was mathematical didn't really know how to explain to me how to do it, so I just didn't get it all. But it isn't like that math is crucial to life. Reading, you're pretty much in trouble if you can't read. You can't get a driver's license without reading and passing the driver's ed exam, but I don't think there's any math on that test. So you can get by without learning math. And, by the way, as Seven knows, taking my math class, a lot of people come into my math class without math, without knowing a lot of things that a lot of other people have learned in math. But what's fun about teaching adults is it doesn't matter. As an adult, you can learn things quicker, and if I show you some of this stuff, boom, you can get caught up real fast and make up for a lot of lost time in mathematics. It's just that you need to, learning is where you put it into practice. So no matter how many Bible verses I've read, no matter how many Sunday school pins I have for getting to Sunday school on time, okay, I have learned how to get to Sunday school on time, but until I put what I learn, until I put what I'm hearing into practice and it becomes a part of my life, I haven't really learned it. I've learned how to memorize stuff. I've learned how to figure out answers on questions, on tests. But learning is where it becomes a practical part of your life. And then conditioning is the acquisition of specific patterns of behavior in the presence of well-defined stimuli. Now, what was the well-defined stimuli at my house during mealtime? No matter what somebody says, you disagree with them and engage in an argument. And may the best man win. And one day, I don't know where I heard this, but one day, somebody said to me, they said, Tom, because if you practice that at home, isn't this right, that you could take debate at school and pretty much win all the debates because you've had a lot of practice. You've learned how to win an argument just by sitting at the table at mealtime, disagreeing with people. Even if you didn't believe where you were going, you could argue them to come to your point of view, which is kind of scary, but then that's what they do in debate sometimes too. So it's just like, hey, you can become good at debate just by learning that. But see, I was conditioned to do that by the home I lived in. My wife was conditioned to sit quietly and consume all of her food without talking. And then they would either visit while they were eating dessert, or they would go into the living room and then sit down and visit. No, not at our house. After we finished eating, we would go into the living room, someone would turn on the TV, and we would all sit there like zombies. Okay, except my brother, I was talking to him about this recently, and he said, yep, it was true. Us three boys didn't watch that much TV because we just spent our time watching our mother watch TV. Our mother was enamored with soap operas. Have any of you ever seen a soap opera? Dumbest stuff in the world. Nobody lives like that, except the people who live in the soap opera world. And we would watch our mom watch that stuff, and she'd get tears, and she'd smile. It's like she was just so captivated by this thing. And we would just spend our time watching her watch it and think, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, because, see, there was a time in my life when there was no television. That's how old I am. And we got our entertainment from listening to the radio. My favorite radio program was The Lone Ranger. Clump, 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 clump. You'd hear him on the radio riding up on his horse. He wasn't on a horse. He wasn't even wearing his outfit. He was just standing there reading a script. Do you know how they were making that noise to sound like a horse crumping?
Coconut shells.
What?
Coconut shells.
Yeah! And when I heard that, Seventh, guess what I did? I thought, what? So the next time we were at the store, I asked Mom if we could buy a coconut. We bought the coconut, we cut the meat out and eat it. I took the shells, and sure enough, what happens? Sounds just like a horse running across a piece of wood or something. Wow. Sound effects. And all of a sudden, I'm enamored with, how are they making that sound? How are they making that sound? And then television came along. And at first, all we saw were soap operas and news stuff. But then, I don't know when it was in my life, but then somebody decided to put a program on for children. And I remember watching, I watched my mom watch soap operas, and then watched the way she reacted at them. And then the Mickey Mouse Club came along. Teenagers with goofy looking hats with big black ears on, acting stupid. Hey, we loved it. And then when I got to high school, there was, what was that program? The Dick Clark. What? What was it? The Dick Clark?
Dick Van Dyke?
They had, they had these teenagers with all the music and the dancing.
American Bandstand?
American Bandstand. I'll bet that's what it was. American Bandstand. Yeah. And we couldn't wait to get home. And of course, when we would get home, we would want to watch that. And my mom would say, boys, don't you have chores to do? See, before TV, we would come home from school, we would eat a snack, then we'd go out and do chores on the farm. Once the Mickey Mouse Club and American Bandstand arrived, we wanted to watch those before we went out and did chores. And that's when I learned how to do chores in the dark with a flashlight. Because in the dead of winter, and some of this comes from conditioning, and some of it comes from learning. Some learning is other people taught it to you, and some learning we just learn to tie shoes on our own. You just take the initiative and learn to do something. So you kind of need to ask yourself, what kind of conditioning have I experienced in life? And what have I really learned in life? Because both of those are things that happen to all of us. My wife grew up in a home where everybody talked in a whisper. And to this day, she still talks in a whisper. And I say, Nina, you know I'm losing my hearing capacities. I can't hear you. So she'll force herself to talk a little louder, but she's uncomfortable with it because she was conditioned to talk in a soft voice. You know what the solution is, don't you? Ask my wife, she'll tell you. Every time we get a thing in the mail that says free hearing test, she goes, Tom, don't you want to go take that test? I know what they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me I need hearing aids. I've got too many friends with them who don't like them. I said, nope, I'll pass them up. I'll just learn to live without them. I don't want them. On page 186 and 187, it shows a picture of this little puppy dog being made to salivate. No wonder he salivates. Look what they've done to him. Hang him up in those little things like that. That's classical conditioning, where basically, okay, I said this in class at the university one time in a psychology class. I said, does that ring a bell? When we were talking about classical conditioning, and the teacher laughed and nobody else did, and she got it, and other people going, what? And they said, no, it doesn't ring a bell with me. And then the teacher said, he's talking about Pavlov, ringing a bell and making a dog salivate. And they said, they said. See, they had heard that before, but they hadn't learned it. It hadn't become a part of their experience. And to me, that was interesting. When I first learned that about you can put food in front of an animal, you can feed food to your puppy and ring a bell while you feed them, then take the food away and ring the bell and they'll salivate. Can you do that with people? Yeah. You can pair these things together and condition them to do certain things, and that's why I keep asking myself, what have I been conditioned to do? Okay, I'm driving down the road, I'm on a mission to get somewhere, and all of a sudden, okay, when I first moved to Raymore, there were 2 traffic lights between Raymore and Calvary Bible College. 2 traffic lights. One was somewhere in Raymore, and the other one was at 71 Highway. Then they built this big interchange for an interstate. And how many lights do they have at the interchange now? And how many lights in between? They put in so many traffic lights that I'm going, this is killing me. I'm leaving home, driving to work, and they keep flashing a red light in front of me. What would happen if I just ran the red light? what would happen?
They take a picture of your license plate.
What?
They take a picture of your license plate.
They got a camera up there to take a picture of my license plate, send me a letter and say, $100, please. I'm thinking, I worked too hard for $100 to give it to them for doing that. So what have I been conditioned to do? I see the red light, stop the car. And they put up so many of them, they keep stopping me on my way to school, so I'm thinking I'm going to find another way to get there. So sure enough, I go to County Line Road. There are no traffic lights on County Line Road. None at all. Now there are some, but there weren't then. And now they put in a roundabout. The English have invaded, people. Everybody wants a roundabout. It's crazy. And a lot of people don't know how to use them. But then a lot of people don't know how to use on-ramps to an interstate either. There ought to be a refresher course. Before you can drive on the interstate, you need to read the manual on how to use an on-ramp. There's a reason for the way it's constructed. So what? I've been conditioned to stop when the light's red, and then as soon as it goes green, what do? You step on the gas and go. If you do that, that's what I used to do. If you do that now, you'll probably run into the car in front of you. Because the light turns green and the guy in front of you just sitting there. And I said to Nina, do they not see the light turning green? And what's the answer to that question? No, they don't, because they're not watching for the green light. What are they watching? Their cell phone? Their tablet? What are they looking at? They're looking at something rather than waiting for the green light. So as soon as the green, but it used to be, as soon as the light turned green, boom, everybody took off. Not anymore. So what do? You beep, beep, green light, and hope it's not somebody who's going to jump out of his car and shoot you. Because of road rage. It's like, whoa, what? You can't honk your horn at people to remind them the light's green because you might suffer from road rage? You understand what's happened to us in this world? How things that are going on just have an effect on our lives. They start to condition us to do things. And now I keep thinking, okay, the guy's brake lights are on. The light turned green. I saw his brake lights go off. So I know he took his foot off of the brake. So why is he going so slow moving through the green light, moving through the intersection? Well, I didn't understand why that was happening till I bought a newer car with that little green bar on it. Anyone know what I'm talking about? If you push on the gas, I showed my grandson. I said, watch this. We're out on the highway. I stomped the gas to the floor, and the little bar turns like bright red, which is saying you're burning way too much fuel. So you want to keep it in the green or the blue area so you're not burning as much fuel. And the only way to do that is to creep away from the light and go real slow and slowly accelerate. You know, if you're going to buy a car that only gets 15 miles to the gallon, take the little green light out of it and just drive it and burn the gas. You're not going to save that much gas. Well, it's not going to happen, Tom. You better adjust to the world you live in. But there's all kinds of things that we've been conditioned to. I mean, you just can think about some foods. Have any of you ever smelled somebody at your house baking fresh homemade bread? Now see, as soon as I say it, I have to swallow the saliva that forms in my mouth. Because I can smell that stuff. No, you can't. You just make yourself think you can smell it, and it makes you salivate, just like that little puppy dog. Okay. Let's turn over here to page 190. Only rarely, at the bottom of the page it says, Do we have pajama phobias, grass phobias, electric outlet phobias, hammer phobias? Do any of you have a hammer phobia? Have any of you ever hit your finger or thumb with a hammer and it hurt real bad and it turned black and blue? So you're never going to touch another hammer? No, but when you touch one, you're going to be what? Very careful. So you've learned from that. The people who don't learn from that, who every time they pick up a hammer, they whack their thumb, pick it up, whack their thumb, they go, I am not touching a hammer. Say, well, that hasn't happened to you. What about an electric outlet phobia? Have you ever, any of you ever stuck something in an electric outlet to see what would happen? Well, I promise you, if you do, it will put the fear in you real fast of electric outlets. You'll develop a kind of a phobia. When I was in high school, we were goofing around in woodworking shop class, and a guy started chasing me, and I'm running to get away from him, and I'm going to head out the door of the shop room where we're working, but it's a concrete floor with sawdust on it, and I'm running up to the door to open it, but I slide on the sawdust, I put my hand up, I hit the glass window, my hand goes through the window, broke the glass, I pull it back real fast, that was the wrong thing to do, and I sliced, I still have scars where I sliced these fingers. Now, if this door had a window in it, I could not put my hand on the window and push it open. I mean, I know I can, but I won't. Why? Because I have a glass window phobia. That's the result of a one-time occurrence cutting my hand. And in fact, that phobia is so strong for me that if I have a house with a glass door in it, I make sure it's that kind of glass that's either shatterproof, you know, that you can't put your hand through and cut yourself because of that. But they didn't mention that one. Pajama phobia, grass phobia, any of you have those? Have you ever seen a little kid? Have any of you seen these videos on YouTube of people taking little children and giving them their first introduction to grass? They hold them up and they put their feet in the grass, and what does the poor little kid do? Ah, no, 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 that does not feel good. So what does the mother and the father do? Oh, I'm sorry, you don't like grass. We won't put you in it anymore. No, they stick him right back down in there again. Someone should be arrested for cruelty to children, shouldn't they? What's that all about? Well, we're making a YouTube video. Well, let's find something that bothers you and hold you up in the air. Let's see, and let's stick your feet down in, oh, I don't know, how about some mud? And you go, ew, let's see, let's do it again, let's do it again. Let's take these adults and treat them like they're treating these poor little children. That's disgusting. And all of us have a capacity to develop a phobia or a fear of something. Do any of you get a little bit frightened when it's dark outside? Some of you have been spared all the grief in life. To this day, if I step outside at night, if I decide in the middle of the night I'm going to get a flashlight and go out and get something out of the barn in my house, and the barn is probably, what, 30, 40 yards from the house, as I'm walking out there, I will get a little lump in my throat and a little heart beating faster. And here's why. It's my brother's fault. When we were kids, we had chores to do. And one of them was go out after dark when the chickens are right at sunset. The chickens go in the chicken house because if they stay outside, the critters eat them. So they go in the chicken house. Your job is to go out there and shut the chicken house door so the critters can't get in and eat the chickens. And we'd be sitting around there watching television. This never happened before TV came along, but watching television, and somebody would say, Tommy, did you close the chicken house? It's your night to do it. And I'd go, oh no. So I would just get up and trudge outside to go close the chicken house. No phobia, no fear, nothing. And my brother would sneak around the side of the house, and just as I passed the corner of the house, he'd jump out and go, boo! Scare me to death. He did that so often that he didn't even have to go out there. Just as soon as I stepped out the door, my heart's beating faster, a lump in my throat, and I would sing while I'm heading out to the chicken house, thinking that if there's anything going to get me or scare me, hearing my voice, or I would talk or something to make noise to know, let whatever's out there know I'm coming. And I thought, well, surely, now that I'm an adult, I'm over that. Still to this day. It's not as bad as it used to be, but if you develop some of these phobias, it'll probably take you, some of them will stick with you the rest of your life, some of them you get over, and some of them you never do. And just realize that's just part of life. And if it's a phobia that's interfering in my life and I need to get over it, I can figure out ways to handle it. Part of it is figuring out where it came from and dealing with how you develop that phobia. On page 193 is operant conditioning. Operant behavior is behavior designed to operate on the environment in a way that will gain something desired or avoid something unpleasant. Let's see. So, what did I do when this class started? To operate on you, to condition you to read the textbook before you came to class. What did I do when we first started? Remember I came in here and I said, I had little prizes if you had read the chapter, and you were always just a little short of reading the whole chapter, didn't get a prize. I should probably give you a prize just because you're a nice guy. And some of you were probably reading just to get the prize. You follow? You maybe didn't even, you just ran the words through your head real fast so I can get the prize when I go to class. That's behavior that's called operant behavior. And so then I quit giving prizes because here's what I think. Once you've read the chapter before we talk through it, it makes more sense when we talk through it. It's more relevant. It kind of enlarges the lecture to have read the material before we talk through it. Makes the lecture more understandable, more meaningful. So, see, I give a reward to what I call priming the pump to get it started. And then once you see the benefit of it, you'll keep doing it on your own. But then, just to make sure you're doing it, do all of you, when I type an announcement on Canvas, does it notify you that there's an announcement on Canvas? And then as soon as you see that, do you click on it to say, what's this announcement from SS223? You go, no, because I know what it is. It's Dr. Bonine telling me to do something. And I'm not interested in him telling me what to do. So I don't even read them. Oh. So, what do I do now to affect your behavior? To gain something desired or avoid something unpleasant? What happens in Canvas under gradebook, under grades, if you don't read the chapter? And read the collateral reading, and read the websites, and send me an email and tell me you did it? What kind of grade do you get? Thank you, 7. A 0. Did you ever have teachers call that a goose egg? A 0. whoa, what's that all about? That's just simply me using what I've learned in psychology to try to motivate you to maximize learning. And that's the whole point, to maximize learning. Because I want you to get everything you've paid for when you pay tuition. I want you to get the most you can for your money. And it talks about elements of operant conditioning. And basically at the bottom of page 193, the first is the operant response. Something that operates on the environment to produce a specific consequence. And the second is the consequence that follows the behavior. Let's see. So I'm heading home from school, going home after school when our children were in grade school. 2 little girls in the backseat of the car. We're headed down the street. We drive right by an ice cream stand, an ice cream store. And the youngest one says, "Dad, can we stop and get an ice cream cone?" And my standard response always was, "No, I don't think we'll stop and get one today." "Oh, Dad, you never give us ice cream." Yeah. And I just keep driving. And her sister says, "Sister, if you will say, 'Okay, Dad, whatever you say,' he'll go back and buy us ice cream." And she goes, "Okay, Dad, whatever you say." Any idea what I did? I drove around the block, went back and bought both of them ice cream. The oldest one had figured out what I was doing to get them to do what I wanted them to do. So now, who's messing with who here? Am I messing with the children, or are the children messing with me? And what's the answer to that question? Both, isn't it? And you know what I learned from that? Even when they know what I'm doing, it still works. The Bible says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it." So I thought, and I read a book one time, What Wives Wish Their Husbands Knew About Women. James Dobson wrote this book, and I read it and I said, "Nina, James Dobson says this. Is that true?" And she goes, "Yes, Tom, that's true." I go, whoa. I mean, tell your wife you love her every day. What, she wakes up in the morning thinking, does he still love me? What's going on here, people? I never could figure it out, but I thought, you know, if that's what he says to do, I'll try it and see what happens. And then finally, I realized this is just part of the way God wired women. They like to hear, just like we like to eat every day, they like to hear every day, "I love you. I love you." And my first thought was, maybe it's from when I was growing up and I never heard people in our family say, "I love you." I knew I was loved, but it's like, hey, I told her I loved her when I proposed. If I change my mind, I'll let her know. That isn't good enough. Every day. You got to write this down if you want to stay out of trouble when you get married someday. Every day. And you girls, here's what you have to do, ladies. When you get married, you tell your husband to call me, that Dr. Bonine has a few things to say to you. Since I have daughters, whenever a girl from my class gets married, I tell her, tell your husband to call me if he's messing up, and I'll set him straight. And the first thing I ask all the guys who marry girls is, are you taking care of her? Are you treating her right? Are you loving her as Christ loved the church? Because that's what it's all about. And if a guy doesn't want to do that, then he shouldn't get married. So check it out. So in order to do that every day, this is pretty sad, but I had to do it. I had to put an index card in my pocket and write down on it, tell your wife you love her. And then when I did it, I'd put a little check mark to remind myself that I told her that. Wouldn't that be disgusting if your husband had to write a note on a card to remind him to say the words, Nina, I love you? Okay, here's what she would say. Well, it would be nicer if he would just remember it and do it spontaneously, but what he's doing is what? Better than nothing? You want to know what actually happened after a while? You know why I don't carry those cards anymore? If you carry the card to remind you to do it long enough, after a while, you start doing it without having to be reminded. You become a different person. You become better than you were when you first got married. How cool is that? So you can not only use this stuff on other people, you can use it on yourself. And you can see other people doing it with you, and you can turn around and do it back. And the reason this stuff is so popular is because it works. And what amazes me is a lot of people haven't stopped to think about it. And so you just think about, okay, reinforcers, or rewards sometimes they're called, and punishments. Rewards, reinforcers are things that cause the behavior to increase, and punishers are things that cause the behavior to decrease. My wife never did like this. But see, you already heard, I'm a pretty radical person. So when our children had so many toys because so many people gave them stuff, and I don't like hearing my children fuss. I don't know why. I just never did like, here, I grew up in a home where we argued about everything, and I didn't like hearing my two daughters fighting over something, arguing about something. And I would go in the room and I'd say, so what's the problem here, girls? And they said, well, I want to play with this toy, and she wants to play with it, and she was playing with it yesterday, so it's my turn today. And I said, give me the toy. And they would give me the toy. I said, so this is what you two girls are fussing about, right? They go, yes. And so I would find a trash can. I would put the toy in the trash can and then stomp on it and crush it. I said, there. We won't fight over that one anymore, will we? Any idea what effect that had on my two daughters? What happened when they were inclined to fight or fuss about playing with a certain toy? And I said, what's going on in there? You girls need some help solving this problem? What did need help to solve this problem mean? That another toy is going to bite the dust. And Nina goes, Tom, why didn't you just put it in the top of the closet and tell them they can't play with it for a while? Because they would know eventually they get it back. This behavior is so bothersome to me, I'm going to make the consequences of such a magnitude that they'll cut it out. And they did. Okay. Punishment? Well, they'd like to show a picture of how they punish people in New England by embarrassing them in public. Actually, there's probably something to that, isn't there? To public embarrassment is like a form of punishment because we're social creatures. But you don't want to take it to such an extreme. I think all it takes is a little bit of it. To me, a little bit of punishment goes a long way. And probably the greatest problem in the world today is that we're more inclined to use punishments than we are rewards, and the book calls them reinforcers because some people don't like rewards. In fact, I think the textbook talks about this. Somewhere it talks about over here. Where does it talk about it? Let's see. Oh man. Maybe I skipped over it already. It was where where supposedly rewards and punishments started with Thorndike and his experiments with animals. It didn't start there. Have you ever read that Bible verse where God said to his chosen people, the nation of Israel, I set before you a blessing, reinforcer, and a curse, punishment. You remember that verse from Deuteronomy? A blessing if you obey, and a curse if you disobey. You follow that? This is not something he invented. In fact, I tell people, he really plagiarized the Bible, but he doesn't know he did because he probably didn't read the Bible. He just observed humanity and realized that that's the way the world works. We respond in a positive manner. We do more of what's expected of us when we're looking for a reward. One time I had a parent say to me, I don't like the fact that you reward my children for doing their homework. They should just do it because they want to. And I smiled and I said, where do you work? And he said, Caterpillar Tractor. I said, I'm going to call your boss and tell him he doesn't have to pay you anymore. That you just want to come over there and build Caterpillar tractors to make the world a better place. He goes, okay, I see your point. I mean, it's just like, okay, when our girls were younger, would this shock anyone to know that I paid them for doing their chores around the house? My wife wanted our girls, remember I told you today, she said, girls, would you like to help clean the table? And she wanted them to just get up and say yes. And I said, Nina, you know what? Make a list of all the things you want these girls doing every day. And then so you don't have to nag them about it, because she didn't want to do that. I said, then every day when they've done it, you put a check mark by it, and at the end of the week, then I'll pay them for all the check marks. And it started out being a penny, then it went up to 2 cents, and as they got older, it went to a nickel and a dime. And I had a friend say one time, you pay your children to do these chores? And I said, yes. He said, well, I don't. I just expect my kids to do it. And I said, do you give your kids an allowance? And he said, yes. I said, well, I don't. I expect my kids to earn it. And how did they earn it? By doing their chores. Now, here's what a friend said to me. If you do that, Tom, your kids are going to want to be paid for everything they do. You know what happens after you've done something long enough and you realize how beneficial it is? You get to the place to where you start doing it without being paid for it. And it didn't mess their lives up. Because somebody thought, well, it came from Thorndike and all that stuff, and Skinner. No, it came right from the Bible. Okay, we'll finish up this chapter on Friday. You have a good day.